This is Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast, with your hosts, Brandon Spinner and Michael Burns. And welcome into Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast. I am Brandon Spinner alongside Michael Burns, always the two of us here as we talk bourbon and baseball most weeks. But today we're going with another whiskey bourbon review, or a bourbon whiskey review. But first off, Michael, how you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing all right. Hoping my palate's not affected by something I'm coming up with from something I'm sure I brought home from my little petri dishes, my 2-year-old and 4-year-old petri dishes. So
Petri dishes or your travels, possibly?
that too. It is an odd timing
Yeah.
with that travel and all of a sudden coming down with something.
Yeah. I'm getting over something myself as well. I've had this cough and this stuffiness for the last week and a half or so. My body's run down past a kidney stone, so that was fun. So we're gonna power through this one.
Having a blast over here at B&B.
The B&B is bruised. Barrels and bruised.
Beaten and bruised.
Brandon and Burns, Barrels and Barrels. That's the first time that connection just happened. Like a light bulb.
Did we just become best friends?
Yep. So we're going to do a whiskey review tonight. First, thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us. You may be watching us on YouTube. If you are, please hit that subscribe button right below. We're getting closer and closer to 50 subscribers. We'd love to hit that mark here by the end of February, which we are now in. And also...
For baseball season.
Yeah, we're baseball season a couple days away. We're not talking weeks away. We're talking days at this point. Not only that, can you like the post or comment what you think about this episode? We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Also, head on over to Instagram, Facebook. Just search Barrels and Barrels Pod. That is Barrels, the letter N, Barrels Pod. You can also find us there on YouTube if you haven't watched us there yet. Twitter, Barrels and Barrels. We've become a little more active there. And also, don't forget, you can email us if you want to buy some of our merchandise. We've got shirts right now, barrelsandbarrels@gmail.com. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Amazon. And if you're over there, can you do us a favor? Please, 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 please hit the download button. And then also at the bottom of each app, you can rate us. Hopefully it's a 5-star. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We got a first down vote on YouTube. But we'll take all the positivity because we had like 100 like votes. So 100 to 1, I think we're good. And always embrace the negativity because it tells you can do something better, right?
They just didn't like your hairstyle that day or something, Brandon.
Probably that. That was probably that. It's a Brandon issue, that is for sure. As far as today's podcast, we are going to be doing a whiskey review on a not too seen bottle. A lot of people don't know too much about this place. Whiskey Acres Distilling Company. Michael, you were kind of surprised when I sent you a picture of this, and you're like, what is that?
Right. Well, at first it kind of pops out like a Blue Note juke joint from a distance. If you kind of squint and you're like, oh, Brandon, you got a juke joint there. But it doesn't. It's not. It is something different.
It is something completely different. This is Whiskey Acres Distilling Company's Blue Popcorn, so it just makes it jump out even more. Straight bourbon whiskey. So Whiskey Acres is a distillery out of the Chicago suburb area, if you want to call it the suburbs. It's more so the Chicago farmland. DeKalb, Illinois. I don't know if you know where Northern Illinois University, or you've ever heard of the Northern Illinois University Huskies. They're in DeKalb. So this is right down the street from the university, just outside of Chicago. I'd say it's about a 45 to 55-minute drive, depending on traffic on I-88. But there's a lot of this going on around the Chicagoland area. It's pretty popular up there in those neck of the woods. They're an all estate grown, estate distilled, and estate bottled. So everything they put in their juice is grown by them and distilled by them. So this is not being sourced by anyone. This is all straight, as they call it, seed to spirit.
Surprise! It's not like because we did that Ben Holiday and it was a Missouri straight whiskey where everything was produced and grown and everything in Missouri. So kind of the same deal here, but Illinois.
Yeah, Illinois, or the S is silent, pal. But no, I think the reason it's not called Illinois straight bourbon whiskey is because there may not be a law. I haven't looked at the laws, but each state has its own liquor laws, so that's why
Right.
Missouri straight bourbon whiskey was a thing, and I would consider this an Illinois straight bourbon whiskey because it does fit the bourbon protocol. It is 75%. There's the mash bill. 75% blue popcorn, 15% soft red winter wheat, and
Whoa, say
10%.
that again. One more.
Yep.
Go back. You said 75% blue popcorn, not just corn?
75% blue popcorn. So it's just a blue corn um,
Okay.
uh, mixture. So that still fits in the corn.
Yeah.
15% soft red winter wheat, and then you say soft red winter wheat 10 times. Wheat. And then 10% malted barley. So for the third time, 75% blue corn, 15% soft red winter wheat, and 10% malted barley. Again, from the distillery, it is all grown seed to spirit. It's all there in DeKalb, Illinois. This comes in at least 4 years old and 97 proof. So
Sounds interesting. That mash bill sounds interesting. High corn, blue corn, and wheat in there. No rye.
no rye. They do
I'm
grow rye,
intrigued.
but yeah, I'm expecting just by the mash bill it to be on the little sweeter side of things, just because you've got more of the wheat. This MSRP is
Wheat.
supposed to be coming in around $60 to $70, so it's not going to break the bank. I know they wait in line for this big time
Ooh.
across the area. I think there was a 5 hour line or so for the drop at the distillery. They can find it in a couple of different stores in the Chicagoland area. I don't know where they distribute to, but I'm sure if you've got a big box store, you can just ask them and they might be able to tell you yes or no. But this blue
Seems like you
popcorn,
just need to start shopping at distillery releases. Just go start lining up, meeting people, meet and greet kind of deal, and get the special releases. That snowflake that we had was delicious. The anything, I mean, usually anything waiting in line is,
right,
unless it's just you're waiting in line, you're allocated, still,
right.
allocated drop nearby. But
I have had a couple of Whiskey Acres pours. My uncle had his 60th birthday there, so our family got some Whiskey Acres little shot glasses as the like take home event. None of the kids were there, aka none of the children in the family, which I am a part of. So it was like all my uncles and my aunts and my grandparents. So and their spouses, yada yada. It was a smaller gathering, but so I haven't been there, but they do rent out their facility. I've heard it's really cool, really nice. They do weddings there and all that. So if you're in the area, go check out Whiskey Acres. We're going to check out this bourbon. I've already poured it a little bit. Michael, have you been able to sniff it a little bit at all?
I'm taken, not taken back in a bad way or a good way necessarily, but I do. It is on the darker smelling side. It's not as sweet smelling. It's not
Really?
like I expected it to smell more towards like a Buffalo Trace sweet, and this is more of a, I don't know if pungent's the right word.
It's kind of
If that's a,
funk.
I'm not trying. Yeah, it's a different sweet smell.
First thing that jumps off the nose to me is candy corn,
Yeah, it's definitely
like a
it's
waxy
a
candy corn.
it's a heavy yeah it's a heavier sweet.
Yeah, I've got
Um,
caramel
I can't.
for sure. Caramel and candy corn really jump off the nose.
Yeah, well, I don't know if
That's
wonder
all
if
I'm
that's
getting.
the blue. What is that that's popping out like that differently? Is it the malted barley? Maybe that
Could
ten
be the
percent
the
malted
malt.
barley.
Yeah, it's got a malty. Like the more I pull, it's got more of that malt hit to me. It is
Yeah.
10%, so that's a little higher than a lot of those other bourbons that you drink. Even if you think about the MGP high rye, that's 60-36-4. Uh, so it's not quite as high on the. Well, obviously there's no rye in it, but even the winter wheat is at 15%. So this is primarily corn.
Yeah, I don't get a typical oak smell of a bourbon out of this at all. It almost smells more American whiskey-ish on the nose than it does bourbon.
Yeah, I don't get that. I don't get that classic bourbon even whiff like you mentioned either. Like there's not much oak. There's not a whole lot of wood to the smell with it at all. I don't get any cinnamon, no pops of any of that either. And I've been
I'd be
pulling out a lot
curious
of
to the
cherry.
char level.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd be
they
curious to the
don't
char
list
level.
that from what I've been able to do the research. I've had a couple pours from Whiskey Acres, as I mentioned. I got another sample from Alex, the Bourbon Rebellion on Instagram of one of their also fall. I think it was our October release. It was the red version. I think it was supposed to be like something bloody or something like that. I have to look, but very strong. Like, man, I keep getting that candy corn and the caramel. It smells sweet, but
It's not but it's almost not even a sweet caramel. It's it must be the malt that's coming through for me so strong. It's not bad, but again, it's just not your typical bourbon taste. But see, you're chewing over there. You ready for a first palate note? What you getting there?
uh, a lot of, I thought it was ethanoly up front. It's on the thinner side as it enters the mouth. Like, for as sweet, I expected a little more thickness as it walked in, if you know what I mean. It's got, I can definitely pull the corn out for sure. It's got that corn up front. It does pull the caramel, and the longer it sits in your mouth, the more, I think, well coated it becomes. I think the back half is definitely better than the first half of the pour in my mind. I think it finishes better than it starts.
I don't. I didn't get the ethanol at first. But it definitely has still a no oaky taste. It is definitely, I would say, more of a seasonal kind of taste.
Mm-hmm.
It is like you said, it is thin. I bet. Did you say what the age was? Does it have an age
It says at
statement on it?
least 4 years.
Okay, I think that's where that thinness comes out. And maybe it could be the oak of just being a younger bourbon or
It could
younger
also be the
whiskey.
climate too, because Northern Illinois doesn't get as big of swings as Kentucky would. Humidity may not be quite as strong, because even the short barrel was around the same proof that we had a couple of weeks ago and the same age. Yet that came in on the more mapley side. That was a different mash bill, obviously, but even
Yeah.
with the aging, that was a lot thicker. I'm gonna say it's got caramelish to it. I
Mm-hmm.
think there's some caramelish on the bottle. It says blue popcorn showcases aromas that take you to the movie theater. Caramel apple. I don't get the caramel. I don't get the apple. I get the caramel. Toffee popcorn. Definitely got a little bit of the popcorn. And fruit
Uh-huh.
candies complement the rich, warm oak and vanilla notes. I didn't get much of the vanilla. There's some wood spice on the backside. I've got a little bit of the woodiness. I wrote that down here. Wood behind the pour. And the finish isn't bad. I think it's lingering,
It
lingering
does
enough.
linger. Like you said, the climate's different. I mean, in the Chicagoland, you've got winter and then you've got August. So, you really don't have a lot of humid, hot months to have that wood swell
Mm-hmm.
at all too much. So that could have an impact of how much woodiness you get out of it. But I think it's a good tasting. It
Mm-hmm.
tastes young.
I will say
Um,
that it's got a younger taste to it. I wonder what an extra year or two in the barrel would do, especially in that climate. Climate, it doesn't bite
yeah,
at all.
no, there's no bite to it.
I think
What'd you
that's
say this
part of
proofing was?
97.
97? Yeah.
I think that's the wheat. I generally think that wheats drink underneath their proof, or at least don't burn and have that like kick that you normally would get.
I wouldn't say this is anything to, crazy taste. It's definitely different.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't taste like, it doesn't taste like a Maker's. That's a wheat. I don't get any spiciness out of it. And you know what it actually reminds me of is a local one here in Huntsville. It reminds me of Jeff Irons One.
Really?
It does remind me of just the complexity. It has a good flavor profile, but it's not necessarily super oaky, super bourbony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this
It
doesn't
has
have a.
kind of it's
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's got like it's got like two layers to it. I feel like a little bit, and where like Barrel Vantage is
Mm-hmm.
complexity all over. The Maker's Mark BRT2, those are just complex all over. You get this flavor, you get this flavor, you get this note, you get this note. I feel this has a flavor, but not notes everywhere.
Right. It's very simple in that regard. I think
Mm-hmm.
it could be a little thicker in the mouthfeel, but I like the tingle on the back end. That's what I'll call it. It's more of a tingle. There's not much of a burn. There's not much of the pop roxy that we've talked about in the past. I think it's an even burn though, and I think it's an even tingle. So on our Barrels and Barrels of Bourbon and Baseball podcast rating scale, which ranges from Hall of Fame at the very top All-star number 2. Number 3 is an everyday player. 4 goes to a bench player. And then 5 is a designate for assignment, which means I don't want this on my bar. Michael Burns, where do you rate this one?
I being that this has a good flavor to it, I could definitely, go to this. So I think I'm gonna give this a bench guy.
A bench. Yeah,
Yes.
I agree. I'm going to go with the same rating on that one. I think that it's a pretty good bourbon. I'd love to see what they do with this again. I know this has been an annual release for the last 2 or 3 years, one that people crave about. I think it's good. I don't think it's incredibly great. I like what they're doing out there. I like the difference. I love putting the neck out there and doing something different, right? Rather than continuing to put something out that somebody else already has. I love the uniqueness of the 75% blue popcorn part of that, 15% red winter wheat, and again, 10% malted barley. I'm going to bench this. And for those listening or new listeners, and for those at Whiskey Acres, a bench isn't a knock. Think of some of the better baseball players that are bench players, right? They come off the bench in the time of need, maybe to mix things up. Maybe you've got a tough pitcher that has been just dealing and you need them to get a different look. I think that that's what this does. For those of you in the Chicagoland area who listen, I know some friends and family out that way. If you see this, I would say grab a bottle for $50 to $60. I think it was $59.99. I think MSRP. I believe my in-laws got this for about $79 to $80, maybe a little more. But I would say
I think it'd be
grab
a
it.
great spring taste, spring profile to it, flavor profile.
To me, it's
So
got more of
here
a
we're
little
in February.
fall, but the caramel
Think
and
fall.
the corn give me a little more fall vibes. I know they drop this in November and December usually every year. It doesn't have that high heat that you would expect for a winter whiskey. Um,
I'd be
I'm
curious if this hat did proof up, what it would do to the profile at all.
yeah
If you added, 108, 112, 113.
yeah. I would be interested to see even 104 and maybe an extra year in the barrel just to see if you could pull a little more of that oakiness out of it. Especially, I think it may be a little bit longer for Northern Illinois. Who knows, right? Because there are some good 2 or 3 year old bourbons. So, but yeah, I'm gonna put this on the bench as a bottle that if I saw it again, I'd grab it. But it's not something that I have to have every year. But it's not bad.
Something nice change of pace.
So thank you to the in-laws for that one.
Switch things up on the starting pitcher that's just destroying your starting lineup.
Yes. So that has been another episode of Barrels and Barrels, the Bourbon and Baseball podcast. This was a bourbon review. Please rate us and review us, just like the reviews we give. We try to give our honest opinion. We're not bought. I tell you that very, very sincerely. Michael DFA'd something that I did not expect him to DFA, and I gave an all-star to something I didn't expect us to give all-stars to. So we would love you to rate us, review us on a 5-star scale, hopefully a 5. But if you've got some problems, if you've got some thoughts, we'd love to hear them. So reach out to us. Again, you can find us on Instagram at Barrels and Barrels Pod, Facebook at Barrels and Barrels Pod, Twitter at Barrels and Barrels, and you can email us barrelsandbarrels@gmail.com. We're on YouTube, Barrels and Barrels Pod. Please subscribe if you're watching there. Right there underneath us, there's a subscribe button. We'd love to see that. And again, rate us, review us on Apple and Spotify podcasts. We're also on Google, iHeart, and Amazon. Michael Burns, where can we find you on Instagram?
Instagram, I'm at BNB_Burns. And as we get closer to baseball season, you'll see more interaction baseball there. And on my Twitter, which is Burns_BNB. For
And
sure.
I am whiskey_weather, as you see above me. This has been an episode rating and reviewing Whiskey Acres Blue Popcorn. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Any last words, Michael?
Let's go.